Hello and welcome to the Winneshiek Energy District's October Energy Lunch, Alliant Energy Rate Case Results with Jim Martin-Schramm. My name's Kristen Eggen. I'm the Executive Director here at the Winneshiek Energy District, and I'll be your host today. A few housekeeping items before we kick it off. Please stay on mute during the presentation. If you would like to submit a question to the chat, we welcome that, and we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. The presentation will go about 45 minutes, and it is being recorded. The recording will be emailed out after the event, along with the slides and accompanying resources, and it will also be put up on our YouTube channel, which I will put in the chat right now. So feel free to go there and subscribe so you can follow all of our Energy Lunch webinars. Today, I have Jim Martin-Schramm with me here. Welcome, Jim. Great to have you here. Jim is a policy analyst for the Clean Energy Districts of Iowa, Winneshiek Energy District, longtime board member and manager of the CEDI Coalition. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Kristen. Glad to be with you. Nice to see everybody on the session. I'm just going to share my screen so I can run through several slides. Hopefully, you'll be able to see them right now. Kristen, you can see them. Okay, great. So I've gone through this slide deck a few times, and I'm trying to stay within the time limits. I am a retired college professor, so we tend to talk in 50-minute increments. Whoops, what's going on here? I guess maybe I have to advance with my mouse. So I'm going to share a brief background to the Alliant rate case, talk about the CEDI coalition that intervened in it, talk about why CEDI didn't join the non-unanimous partial settlement agreement, and then focus on the projected impacts by ratepayer class of the approved rate increase, and then end with some brief remarks about next steps for customers. So in terms of the rate case, it was just about this time a year ago that Alliant filed its application to increase rates, or to adjust rates, is the term they prefer to use. The original proposal was for a $284 million increase in what's called their revenue requirement that was going to be phased in over 2 years, starting this October, and then again another rate hike in October of 25. I'll just tell you right now that got clobbered, and so it's just there's just a one-time application of the rates, and I'll talk about what the revenue requirement is. This was Alliant's 6th request to increase electric rates in the last 20 years. It's important to know that there are less than 500 households in the state of Iowa that pay more for their electricity than the 410,000 households in Alliant's monopoly service territory. Alliant's costs for residential ratepayers are very high, and they have some of the highest residential costs in the Midwest. I'm going to share, or Kristen's going to share with you the slide deck that I'm using today, because the deck includes various hyperlinks. Like this one is a link to a presentation I gave back in January that talks more about what is in this rate increase. What is it that Alliant is requesting money for? And then this link is to the CEDI Coalition webpage on the CEDI website. So you may want to, peruse those later. I wouldn't encourage you to do it now, otherwise you'll miss what I'm saying. CEDI intervened in the Black Hills Energy natural gas rate increase case, but just as CEDI, as the Clean Energy Districts of Iowa. In this particular rate case, we decided to intervene, or petition to intervene, at the Iowa Utilities Commission as a coalition. And the coalition consisted of the 13 Iowa energy districts, and there are more, I will add, that are in development, along with communities in the Alliant service territory. And this map shows you the pin locations of the 50 communities that ultimately voted to join the CEDI coalition. I'm proud to say that the city of Decorah was the first community to join the CEDI coalition. In addition to forming the coalition, as we reached out to communities, we also gave them a draft resolution that they could modify to express their concerns to the Iowa Utilities Commission about the magnitude of Alliant's proposed rate increase, as well as just other aspects of it, other things that the community wanted. So the 50 coalition communities signed the resolution, but so too did 35 additional cities and 3 counties. We didn't even reach out to counties. Some of the cities passed our invitation to join the coalition onto their boards of supervisors. So anyway, you can see a pretty significant distribution of those communities around the state of Iowa. Alliant does serve, I think it's 80 of the 99 counties in Iowa. So that's one reason why you see this geographic representation. We had the good fortune of securing the legal services of Skinner Law Office in Altoona. And this gentleman to the right here is Cecil Wright. He led our legal efforts along with his son, Cameron. Cecil retired recently from over 2 decades of service at the Iowa Utilities Commission, where he held a variety of positions, including senior staff attorney, general counsel, and the chief operating officer of the whole organization. So not a pretty knowledgeable person when it came to dealing with a rate case like the one we were in. We also had the CEDI coalition submit a testimony in 3 different rounds of testimony from 3 different expert witnesses. This is Dave Berg. He's a licensed professional engineer with 40 years of experience in the electric utility industry. He addressed issues related to cost of service and rate design proposals. Then Carl Rabago was probably our most famous expert witness. He's a former member of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. That's not a minor thing. Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Energy and former director of the Rocky Mountain Institute. There are several other credentials I could list. A very important figure in American energy policy. He addressed distributed energy resources, solar, wind, battery storage, as well as the critical need for distribution system planning, as well as integrated resource planning, which normally means integrated generation resource planning. So anyway, Carl was critical to our testimony, as was Dave, and then yours truly provided testimony addressing customer affordability issues, the heightened energy burden experienced by low-income households in Alliant service territory, as well as Alliant's management efficiency. This page and the next one, these are all hyperlinks. I'm not going to talk about them, but these are key documents that we filed. In this case, motions and post-hearing brief and stuff like that. You're welcome to dip into those. And then there are 3 rounds of testimony in rate cases like this: direct testimony, cross rebuttal, where you respond to other witnesses, and then after Alliant responds to both of those rounds of testimony, then the interveners submit surrebuttal testimony. So you can see all 3 witnesses contributed to each of those stages. And you know, if you suffer from insomnia, this is a great solution. It's quite detailed stuff. So that gets us finally to the main point of this webinar, which is to talk about the final decision and order in this rate case. As I said, the case was filed last October. It went through a period of time where it wasn't quite scheduled for review, and then in January of this year it was scheduled. And so now we've come to the end, or almost to the end. So the board issued its final decision and order on September 17th of this year. I'm sorry, I'm gonna make the mistake of referring to the Iowa Utilities Commission as the board, because only very recently did they change their name to the Iowa Utilities Commission. So I'm so used to calling it the board. So just forgive me if I talk about board, I'm talking about the commission. I've read a lot of these. This is 161 pages long. It is really quite extraordinary. So I'm going to try to get into the meat of it. First of all, I'm going to start by identifying things that I think Alliant and the Utilities Commission want you to know. and that is that they reduced the revenue requirement from 284 million to 195 million, or 185 million. So a $99 million reduction in the increased revenue requirement. That's, that's a big chunk, right? The commission wants no class to experience more than a 15% maximum bill increase at the end of after this increase is approved. There are tax credits that are going to flow back to customers through something called the tax benefits rider in the first year. These are one-time tax credits that will reduce the impact of the rate increase in the first year by about 40%, I think. And then there are additional tax credits, annual tax credits that will flow back to customers through the energy adjustment charge. And so this charge will be reduced because of these tax credits flowing back to customers from some of Alliant's renewable energy projects. They've eliminated something called the renewable energy rider, which was a line item on your bill. It was a cost. Now that's been eliminated. That was introduced after the last rate case, and now it's being eliminated in this rate case. The board approved a revision to something called the individual customer rate, the ICR tariff, and this is a tool that Alliant is using to attract new high volume customers. And the hope is that the increased revenues from sales to those customers will help reduce costs for all Alliant ratepayers in the future. We insisted on a variety of protections for ratepayers so that any costs that are not recovered from these new customers are not borne by ratepayers in other classes, but are only borne by those customers. And then there are several provisions in the approved settlement agreement that could improve customer affordability over the long run. And so I'm going to turn to those next. Here are the key provisions in the non-unanimous partial settlement agreement. As I said, a $99 million reduction in the revenue requirement. I'm going to talk about each of these in more greater detail in a moment. A conditional 5-year moratorium on base rate increases. I'll try to explain what the base rate increase is versus your bill increase. An earnings sharing agreement, a 3-year resource evaluation study, and a $900 million distribution spending cap. So let me just say a little bit more about each of those. The CEDI, I should back up here, if I know how to do it. There we go. The CEDI coalition was invited to join the settlement after it was finalized through negotiations between Alliant Energy, the Iowa Office of the Consumer Advocate, which is a division of the Attorney General's office, as well as IBEC, the Iowa Business Energy Coalition. Those parties negotiated the settlement, which includes these provisions and several others. And then it was presented to us as more or less a done deal. And there are things we like about the settlement, but there are lots of things we thought could have been improved. And so we asked for those improvements, knowing they wouldn't be accepted, and they weren't. And so we did not join the settlement. And that's the case for some other intervening parties as well. So with regard to the revenue requirement, I mean, the $99 million reduction is a big number. There's no question about it. But it still provides Alliant with 65% of what it requested in October of 2023, and thus, in our view, perpetuates what we call business as usual. This table shows you key information related to Alliant rate cases since 2002. And I'm just going to focus on the ones in the last 14 years, the last 4. So in 2010, the company came in and asked for a rate increase of $163 million. The board at the time approved $114 million, so the company walked away with just about 70% of what they asked for. Then 7 years later, they came in and asked for $176 million. They got $130, so they got about 74% of what they asked for. In 2019, which is when the Decorah Area Group intervened as interveners, the company asked for 204 million, received 127, and so only got 62.2% of what they asked for. And this time around, they came in asking for 284 million, got 185, and left with 65%. Well, the average of those 4 years is 68%. And so from our perspective, this looks to us like the company knows they're not going to get what they asked for. And they look at what they've gotten in the past and they say, well, let's shoot for that. And so in our view, this, even though it's a $99 million reduction, at the end of the day, the company is probably getting just about what it was looking for. And as a result, nothing's really changed. It's business as usual. The company comes in, gets what it wants, leaves. And I should say, on the same day that the Utilities Commission issued its final decision and order, Alliant Energy's stock price reached a 52-week high on the very same day. So Wall Street is happy, even if Main Street is not. So there's the $99 million reduction in the revenue requirement. Then there's also this conditional base rate moratorium. And so this isn't insignificant. In our testimony, in my testimony, we argued for a rate freeze, which Alliant had experienced in Wisconsin with its Wisconsin Power and Light Company. And so, when we saw the base rate moratorium, we were pleased with that. The problem is it's a 5-year moratorium. And in general, that's about the period of time, 4 to 5 years between rate cases. And so, is this really a moratorium, or are they just calling it that and they just intend to come back in 4 or 5 years or after 5 years and pitch another rate increase? I know how we would bet if we had to bet on that. The other matter here is that the moratorium pertains to base rates. And I'll show you in a few minutes here a diagram or an image that kind of a pie chart that sort of breaks up the components of your bill. But for residential customers, your base rate is your monthly service charge, and then your usage charges. And those equal about 66% of your monthly bill. So there's another, third of your bill that isn't part of this moratorium. And probably the most important factor in it is this regional transmission service rider, which has been increasing at over 5% per year. So Alliant sold its high voltage transmission to ITC Midwest. ITC Midwest charges Alliant to bring high voltage power to the Alliant service territory, and then Alliant passes those costs on to its ratepayers by customer class. And so it's this is a very important item of our bill that is not in this base rate moratorium. Another thing that's good about the settlement agreement is that it includes an earnings sharing mechanism. In our testimony, we criticized Alliant for not proposing or supporting a revenue sharing agreement in the past. MidAmerican has such a revenue sharing agreement, and for that reason has not come in for a rate case since, I think, 2014, for 10 years at least. And so this has the prospect of really helping, defer rate cases. But if the company earns more than it's supposed to, or if any shared earnings above the 15% class cap, it's important to know these are not going to be refunded to customers. Instead, these excess revenues that are allocated to customers are going to be used to pay down what's called the undepreciated plant balance on Alliant facilities with the highest returns on equity. So I forget when the Emory generating station that uses natural gas to produce electricity was built, but when it was approved, it received over 12% return on equity. So if the company put in $500 million to build it, the utilities board at the time said you can earn 12% on that plant balance over the life of the project. So the goal here is to take excess revenues and pay that down so you can get that facility off the books as fast as possible. The problem is ratepayers aren't going to get any rate relief until the next rate case at the earliest. because of this mechanism. So we're just going to have to keep, track it. Another issue in this rate case revolved around what CEDI calls integrated resource planning. This is the norm in probably most of the states in the union, but it is not in Iowa. And so now this settlement agreement is going to result in a new 3-year resource study where Alliant looks at its needs in the future and figures out, well, do we need more wind? Do we need more solar? Do we need more natural gas? But it's a kind of I would call it ad hoc process, but every one of these, there are 3 of these now underway in the last 4 years. And it would be much better if they were consistent across rate cases and across utilities. And so we argued for an integrated resource plan that's more comprehensive and transparent, et cetera. But we didn't get that. And so instead, we got this 3-year resource study. But the commission, in its final decision and order, did say it would publish on its website some guidelines about resource planning that hopefully are going to bring some of the standardization that we and other interveners were arguing is critical. The reason this is important is because up to this point, electric utilities like Alliant, many electric utilities like Alliant, have not been making more money because they're selling more electricity. In fact, Alliant's sales are pretty much level, if not just declining or just wavering a little bit. The way they make money is they build stuff, whether it's wind turbines or put in solar arrays or a natural gas plant or a battery facility or underground power lines. All of that stuff earns them a return on equity. And that's what they need to make their shareholders happy. So this resource evaluation study sounds pretty innocuous, but it's actually pretty important. Then finally, another key feature in the settlement agreement was a distribution spending cap. The Office of the Consumer Advocate presented lots of testimony demonstrating that Alliant is spending far more per customer on distribution lines, especially undergrounding their distribution lines, than other utilities in Iowa and in the Midwest. And again, if they spend the money, they can get an ROE for it. And so we're trying to rein in these costs so that they're only incurred after a benefit cost analysis has been conducted. The Utilities Commission listened to us and other interveners and did add additional reporting requirements with regard to this distribution spending cap that perhaps will help to tighten up Alliance spending in this regard. So those are, I realize that's kind of weedy, as I was saying to Kristen, but now let me try to get into the nuts and bolts for you as ratepayers. How will Alliance rate increase impact you? Some of you may remember this graphic that came in either a postal mailing or via email last October. And remember, it was supposed to be a phased-in, 2-year phased-in thing. So you had here's what your bill is going to look like in October of 24. Here's what it's going to look like in 25. And at the end of it, here's what your total bill increase is going to be. By the way, the Utilities Commission required the company to add this column. So residential customers were looking at a bill increase, not base rate increase, but bill increase of 13.4%. Non-residential general service. So that's basically, Main Street businesses, churches, city government buildings, not wastewater treatment plants, but just general commercial establishments were facing a 20% increase. Large general service in Decorah, that'd be like Stanley Building Products, facing 17.4. Large general service supplementary, these are large customers that have on-site renewables, like Luther, facing 20%. These are average proposed monthly bill increases. And then there are only a few high load factor customers. Lighting is good because lots of cities have, street lighting and stuff. That was looking at 0. And then standby customers, which again is a small group. So I'm not going to talk about them. So that's what we were facing. This, to cut to the chase, this is, as near as we can tell, what's going to happen. So let's just look at this column first. So total number of customers, 399,000 plus residential customers, and then another just under 13,000 residential supplementary. So what that means is these are residential customers that have solar. And the same thing here, general service customers, almost 80,000, but 3,200 of them have solar. And so the company has been saying to the Utilities Commission, it costs, our cost to serve these customers is, the supplementary customers is different from our cost to serve the non-supplementary customers. And you can see the same distinction down here for large general service and general service supplementary. With regard to the rate increase, however, the Alliant is only proposing to address this difference at the LGS supplementary level. So when it comes to residential customers, even though there are total bill increase figures here for what are called firm and non-firm or supplementary customers, the average is 6%. The residential customers are supposed to experience as a class a 6%, no more than a 6% increase. But the general service customer is looking at 15%. So you may remember on this slide, right, it was 13.4%, and now here it's 6%. So the outcome in this rate case for residential customers is it's best for the residential customer. The projected impact is less than 50% of what the expected impact was. Whereas the impact for general service customers, large general service and general service supplementary is not 50%. It's more like, you know, maybe a third less than was expected. So, but the other thing I just want to emphasize here is this is a 15% class cap. It doesn't mean that your bill is not going to go up more than 15%. Your bill very well could go up more, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So these are, I have 3 or 4 of these images. They're taken from the Alliant Energy web electric bill overview page. So these are just screenshots. So when we talk about base rates, we're talking about your basic monthly service charge. That's this guy. Your usage cost, you know, how many kilowatt hours you use. That's your base. So for residential customers, 66% of your bill is base rates. But then look, you know, regional transmission, that's 22% of your bill. And then this energy adjustment charge is also varies, and they just flow that cost on to you. It's their cost to buy natural gas or coal, etc. And they flow some tax credits back through that. So that this number is supposed to go down a little bit. And this one, as I said, has been going up at 5% a year. And then they're just, you know, other smaller chunks that make up your bill. So for the residential customer, your monthly service charge is going to go up 9% from $13 a month to $15.50. Declining block rates have been eliminated across all ratepayer classes, and I'll show you in a moment what that means. They reduced the length of summer from 4 months to 3 months and simplified it to simply be the months of June, July, and August. That should help reduce some costs because power is more expensive in the summer months. Now there are 2 time of day rate options. For the sake of time, I'm not going to talk about those in this rate case, but for residential customers, there are now 2 time of day, including the second one includes a super low charge or a much lower charge if you charge after midnight and before 6 a.m. Or if you use electricity. I'm thinking about an EV charger. Then there are important base rate energy charge increases both for the winter and the summer. And you can click on this link here and go to the residential rate codes to actually see these, what are called tariffs, but just the details of the charges that are levied against residential, all ratepayer classes. Okay, I know this is busy. Alliant says the average residential customer uses 738 kilowatt hours a month. Okay, so if we look at this, this is the energy charge in the winter, this is the energy charge in the summer. This is what you were paying last winter. So for the first 500 kilowatt hours, you were paying 9.9, call it 10 cents. And then after that, for the next 700 kilowatt hours in that month, you were paying 7.7. And then if you were using more than that, you were paying quite a bit less than 7.7. These are declining block rates. They don't make a lot of sense in terms of trying to condition or encourage people to use less energy, because you're paying less the more you use. So we don't really support this. But then of course it depends on what the number is that you're going to replace it with. So in this particular rate case, the compliance rate, the new rate, is going to be not 9.969, but 9.992, which is, not even a 1% increase. That's fine on the first 500 kilowatt hours. Then for the next 700 kilowatt hours, instead of 7.7, you're going to pay the same rate. And you can see what that does. So, the average household uses 738. So the first 500 are at that amount. Well, the next 238 are at that amount. So you're going to see a little increase so long as you're average. But if you live in a house that has old electric resistance heating, or if it's a really poorly insulated house, or a really old, electric furnace or something, well, then you could be looking at a really significant increase in the winter energy charge, because this is no longer 3.9 now it's almost 10 cents. The same thing, the summer, it's this declining block rate doesn't exist in the summer, or didn't exist, and so now for residential, and so you can see the increase there. So if you're kind of eyeballing this in your head, it sure looks to me like more than 6%, and so this is something we're concerned about. So non-residential general service customers, these, again, this is Main Street businesses, City Hall, First Lutheran Church, library, they're all going to be on this rate class. And so for them, they have about 6% of their bill is their monthly service charge. Usage is 63%. So, close to 70% of their bill is base rates. And then you can see how these other chunks factor in. Oh dear, what just happened? Let's see, do I need to, I don't know what I did. Give me a minute, folks. Go back to Zoom and share. And I think that's what I want. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. Kristen, maybe go off mute and let me know. Yep, okay, great. So their monthly service charge isn't going up 19%, it's going up 15% from $20 a month to $23. Again, the elimination of block rates. Again, the reduction of summer pricing by 1 month to those 3 summer months. Only one time a day rate option, but that's the kind of default right now. And then some base rate energy charge increases. So again, you can look at those by going to that website. So for this customer class, Alliant says the average customer uses about 1,200 kilowatt hours a month. And that's incidentally how the declining block rates were set up. So for the first 1,200 kilowatt hours a month, last year you were paying 9.87 cents. Now you're going to be paying 12 cents. That's a 22% increase. And if your business is not super efficient and uses more, well, instead of paying less for that additional electricity, you're going to pay that 12 cents figure. So you're looking at a 66% increase. So the bottom line is you want to be as efficient as you can be to avoid additional costs beyond that sort of 22% increase. The summer, it's a little more serious. You were paying almost 12 cents a kilowatt hour. Now you're going to be paying 16.5 cents, which is almost a 40% increase. But remember, summer is not 4 months anymore; it's only 3 months. So that's probably going to help you quite a bit. But again, if your facility is not, consumes electricity above average, for various reasons, you could be looking at a pretty significant cost increase. Excuse me. So anyway, that's the general service class. The large general service is a much more there are all sorts of different kinds of
just in
businesses.
this very conversation, this is the setting.
Oops. So anyway, I'm not going to use an average here because I don't think using an average is worthwhile. But for them, they have not had a monthly service charge. That's going to change. So for them, their base rate was around 60%, 58%. And then you can see how the other chunks make up their bill. But these are things they don't control. This one takes a little longer to get through. They are getting a new monthly service charge of $95.36. Again, the block rates are disappearing. Large general service customers are billed differently for their electricity compared to residential and non-residential customers. And those of you, if you're involved with, if you're on an LGS plan, you know what I'm talking about. So this bullet is going to explain to you what that looks like, but this ratchet is a very important thing that's going away. It does simplify the billing process for this customer class. Again, the reduction of summer from 4 months to 3, and then important revisions to on-peak and off-peak periods, both for demand and for energy. So again, you pay, this will become clear on the next slide. You pay a certain amount for demand, and you pay another amount for the kilowatt hours of energy that you purchase. And then it will depend on whether you're in on-peak or off-peak periods. This one of the things that we're seeking clarification for from the Utilities Commission is the apparent elimination of a non-time of day rate option. Residential and commercial customers have the option of taking service under a non-time of day rate, which is what you saw before, or different pricing structures based on whether you're using electricity at times when lots of other people are using it. Up to this point, both options were available to the LGS class, but now the company is eliminating the non-time of day option. And so that means this kind of stuff is going to be really important when you're using juice on and off peak. And then, as I said, base rate energy charges. I'm going to show you some of that now. So for the monthly demand charge, Luther, I think, is probably around 2,000 kW per month, although it varies depending, whether you're in the winter or in the summer. And so you can see with declining block rates that, you paid less as you used more, as you had a greater demand for electricity. Now you're going to pay the same rate regardless. So the incentive here is to really drive down your demand, the extent to which you're trying to suck a lot of juice off the grid. And these kinds of figures have the potential to really increase customer bills significantly. Interestingly enough, that's less the case in the summer. So that's good because, electricity, the demand charge is quite high, 2167. But look at the energy charge per kilowatt hour in the winter and in the summer between on peak and off peak. I mean, just look at this one. Off-peak winter energy use, less than a penny per kilowatt hour, now 3 times that. In the summer, 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour, now 4.1 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's, again, summer is 1 month less, so hopefully that's going to mitigate these impacts. But, when you look at triple-digit percentage increases, you got to be a little worried. Large general service supplementary customers, things are the same because they're a large general service, except now they get a new monthly service charge. It's a little less at $78.27. and there's a new excess facilities charge. And their base rate energy charges are different as well. It doesn't look too bad for demand with regard to winter, nor necessarily so bad with regard to summer on the demand. But if you look at the energy charge per kilowatt hour, well, then you're looking at, again, some pretty hefty increases, especially the off-peak period for going in the winter, and the well, frankly, both the on-peak and the off-peak in the summer. I mean, these are some big numbers here. So large general service customers will do well to pay very close attention to the impact of this rate increase on their bills. And so this is my last slide. What should you do? Keep track of your bills, compare them to your bills before the rate increase, keep track of them ideally on an Excel spreadsheet. Alert CEDI if your monthly bills are higher than the 15% class cap. Consider filing a complaint at the Iowa Utilities Commission if in fact your bills are consistently higher than a 15% class cap, and we'd be you. This is a link to that complaint form process. And then, it's pretty basic stuff. If you don't have to use energy, don't. Turn off lights, turn off motors, invest in energy efficiency. Alliant has energy efficiency programs, but it might behoove you to, invest in things even beyond what they incentivize. Consider adding solar to reduce your costs. And then contact your state legislators with concerns you have about your cost increases. CEDI has been engaged at the regulatory level, and we will be engaged this legislative season with state legislators and working through cities and the CEDI coalition, and any interested party. We'll be producing briefing documents to help you talk intelligently to your state legislators about, Alliant's rising costs and how to get a handle on them. So for more info, here are some more links. Again, here's the CEDI Coalition website. Here's my email address. If you want to read the board's final decision and order, here's a direct link to that. And that is it in terms of what I came to share. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, Kristen. I'll see if there are questions people have.
Jim, thank you so much. Thank you for breaking that down into language that we could all digest. That was a lot of work and a lot of testimony, and we're very grateful to you and the whole coalition for taking on this important work to advocate for reasonable energy rates. So with that, I would like to open the floor for questions, inviting anyone listening in to put a question in the chat, or if you'd like, you can come off mute. We didn't get any questions in the chat during the presentation, but I know everyone was probably focused on just taking it all in. So
yeah, a bit of a fire hose.
There's a lot there. And yeah, again, super grateful that there's folks like you to dig into the nitty gritty and help us understand it. One question that I had is around electric vehicles. I understand that electric vehicles take quite a bit of energy to charge, perhaps as much as a whole home might take. And I was curious if companies or institutions like convenience stores that have level 3 chargers, would that be considered an LGS customer?
So one of the intervening parties in the rate case was Walmart. And Walmart had filed testimony asking the company to approve an optional tariff for companies like Walmart who want to offer charging for their customers. I mean, I'm sure the customer would probably have to pay for it, but probably those customers are LGS customers. At least Walmart's are probably LGS customers. I would imagine every one of them is. And Alliant didn't sort of respond positively right away. And we made some similar requests, not necessarily around EV charging, but about heat pumps and stuff like that. And the board, in its final decision and order, did require the company to engage in further conversation with stakeholders like Walmart around optional tariffs for EV charging. So it's possible we're going to see something like that. It won't be only for Walmart. It'll be for any business that wants to try to offer that and is in a, has the enough service to be able to provide those electrons. But yeah, thanks for asking that question. It kind of gets into a small aspect that I wasn't able to talk about. But the EV charging at home will be definitely a possibility if you sign up through the second time of day option. But that means if you use, so you're going to pay very little for your electricity after midnight, but you're going to pay a lot for electricity if you use it during prime time. And then, a little less than that. So you really, and the company, we wanted the company to have tools on its website so that anybody on this call could go in and say, hey, here's my account number. Would it make more sense for me to stay on a non-time of day rate or to go to one of the 2 time of day rates? We wanted those resources to be available within 60 days. And it's our understanding that those resources already exist, but they don't exist online. And the board said, well, we'll ask them to update us after 6 months about the status of the availability of those online tools. The company said, well, it might take us a year to roll them out, which I kind of rolled my eyes at because I know they have the tools. They have built the tools, but to be fair, they're not online tools. So anyway, those resources should be coming to help ratepayers figure out whether a different rate plan makes sense for them.
Thank you. So we are open for question and answer. If anyone has a question they'd like to add to the chat or a comment or some gratitude, we'll take it all. Feel free to come off mute or add that to the chat. I'd follow up, Jim, with another question, which is there more work of the CEDI coalition in this case? Is there wrap-up work or additional digesting that you'll be doing in the months to come?
Well, we have posed a couple questions to the commission for them to clarify with regard to aspects of their final decision and order, and we may actually file a little more in that regard. This is based on, it's called a future test year rate case. So that means that all of the financial assumptions on how much electricity they sell, how much money they make, how many customers they have, all of that is based on projections. And so a year from now, there will be something called a subsequent proceeding. And CEDI will be involved with that, where the Utilities Commission is requiring the company to furnish it with all of this information to make sure that the company isn't earning more than it's supposed to. Or if it is, then how does that work in terms of the earnings sharing mechanism? So that's one way we will remain engaged. We will also remain engaged in terms of this optional tariff possibility because the board asked the company to work with interested stakeholders on things like that. And we will then we will also be engaged as CEDI and hopefully in partnership with some of the communities in our CEDI coalition in terms of reaching out to state legislators about the importance of backing the Utilities Commission by approving in law something called integrated resource planning. Right now, the board doesn't have, they're not required by law to do that. And so the utilities push back if they say you have to do that. But if it's in the law, well, then the Utilities Commission, implements the law. So that's one example. Though there will be other legislative issues that CEDI will be advocating for at the legislature this session. In fact, Andy Johnson and I have a meeting with the governor's energy staffer on Thursday in Des Moines. So we will be continuing to work on these matters.
We have another question.
Another thing that we will be doing every year, every electric utility in Iowa has to submit an annual report. So that's Alliant and Mid-American, the investor-owned utilities, 41 or 42 rural electric cooperatives, and about 135 municipal electric utilities. Utility Commission staff consolidate all of that information into one very large Excel spreadsheet. And then every year we have conducted an analysis of that to ascertain the extent to which Alliance costs are higher or lower than the other electric utilities in the state of Iowa. So we will be doing that once that Excel file is available, which we expect will be the case in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
That's exciting. We'll have to catch back up with you after you've had a chance to analyze some of that. We have a question from Steve Peterson in the chat asking, how might the commission's decision on this rate case affect local energy districts' direction and focus over the next few years?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, right, the approval of yet another rate increase is going to drive up costs for every Alliant ratepayer. And so insofar as each energy district is trying to help citizens in their county save money and recycle those dollars locally in their local economy, I think it just means that energy districts are in the right place at the right time, trying to provide resources to customers to help them figure out how to be more energy efficient and to figure out whether it makes sense for them to invest in renewables like solar, and perhaps even in battery storage technology, though, you know, that can be kind of pricey.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Jim. And thank you, Steve, for that question. We did have a couple more comments in the chat expressing huge gratitude to Jim and Andy Johnson for all they have done for on this issue. And yeah, a couple folks expressing some gratitude for that. So I'll wait a couple more moments for any other questions that come through. Otherwise, thank you so much. Do you have something else?
I just want to say, you know, I mentioned Walmart. I mentioned the Iowa Business Energy Consortium. The other interveners were the Large Energy Group, the Iowa Environmental Council, Environmental Law and Policy Center. But in general, and then of course the Office of the Consumer Advocate, and the Iowa Office of the Consumer Advocate has 4 attorneys and 6 expert witnesses, and they're wonderful people and they're fabulous partners. And to some extent, we were kind of bad cop to their good cop. But when you look around, you go to these hearings and you sit in the room, you know, everybody's all lawyered up, and in general, the people there are the people with the most resources. And, you know, the consumer advocate is legally bound to defend the interests of every ratepayer, every consumer. But we were the only other party in the room that was looking out for the interests of ratepayers in all of the classes. And I will say the Alliant had proposed a pretty significant change to how large general service customers with solar would be billed. And they were going to basically jam that rate class together with what was called the standby rate class. And when Luther College did crunch the numbers, they said they were facing a 48% cost increase because they were being treated as standby customers. We submitted testimony explaining why that was a really bad idea, and the commission agreed with us. And so now the entities like Luther are not facing a 48% or even a 25% increase. It should be closer to that 15% increase. And that's, it's not great, when you spend $1 million a year on electricity, you know, a 48% increase is like apocalyptic. A 25% increase is apocalyptic. But to get it closer to 15% or less would be much, much better. So I guess all I'm trying to say is I think our efforts were worthwhile. I think the residential class is going to benefit the most, but I think things that could have been much, much worse for all of these classes. And so the key now is to be vigilant and to continue to monitor the numbers and kind of hold Alliant's feet to the fire and support the other parties that are in the settlement to, you know, make sure the settlement is being met. The terms are being met. So,
Well, with that, we'll hold Alliant's feet to the fire. Continue this great work, Jim. Thank you so much for taking time today to help get us all up to speed on this important change in our electric rates and all the amazing work that the CEDI Coalition has done to get us to where we're at today. So thank you so much. With that, I'm going to sign us off. I will be sending a follow-up email with Jim's slides that included all those links to deeper resources if you'd love to get in the weeds, so to say. There are plenty of weeds for you to play in. And I'll also include a couple other resources that Jim sent along for me to share with our attendees today. So with that, wishing everybody a great rest of your day, and we'll look forward to being in touch soon about the next energy lunch. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kristen.